We have been saying, we published for the last month the direct statement that Keir Starmer had murdered the Labour Party. Then we said Keir Starmer had politically murdered the Labour Party. Then we said Keir Starmer had been politically murdering the Labour Party. Now that is a statement on the record. And we have posted that statement without any additional explanation because that statement is factually sustainable. So nothing the corrupt Daily Mail can say would ever say what we said. And it could not ever, the corrupt, criminal, racist, lying Daily Mail could ever match the authenticity, the accuracy, and the morality of what he said. And this is the nearest that they can come to saying what we have been saying. But that's it. From this moment onward, the Daily Mail will have to eat its lies, and we shall emphasize the truth and enhance the truth that we have been saying about Keir Starmer having murdered the Labour Party, politically murdered the Labour Party. And the criminals are daring to say, Tories, we are a true workers' party. How dare they? It's complete criminals. But the fact that they dare say that is down to the so-called workers' party. What is that? Socialist W party. We cannot even say the rest of the word. And they have some of the worst kind of defenders of the Labour Party. Typically, they want the Labour Party buried. Now that Starmer has politically murdered the Labour Party, the Daily Mail wants the Labour Party to be buried. And there is a piece by the absolute crook, Andrew Pierce. Now, Stephen Glover, Andrew Pierce, these are deadly liars. And they do not have any explanation whatsoever about anything about the Labour Party. So this Seeking helicopter is the source of deadly cancer-causing fumes, says the Daily Mail, because that helicopter is also flown by Williams. And there is a lot of similar parasitical publicity by the Daily Mail. And it is completely outrageously asserting that Thursday was the historic day Johnson put labor to the sword. Remember what we have said? We have said that Keir Starmer had been politically murdering the Labour Party. So this is absolute lies by the Daily Mail. Unsubstantiated, corrupt, criminal, anti-democratic, pro-fascist, racist people and rubbish. Now, if Amanda Platel, who is a racist, needed an American actress or model who had exposed their body and to condemn that, it wasn't Halle Berry, it was Jennifer Lopez. But she chose Halle Berry and is focusing on attacking Halle Berry because Halle Berry is, of course, like Meghan Markle, of mixed race origin. And that is why they have been attacking Meghan Markle. And they've got a piece here about the submarine sent to sink Stephen Lawrence's killers. I'm not reading the details because this will be another spin for the police. It is not factual, and it is not rigorous, and it is not original. It's a spin, propaganda. And they've got a promotional piece painting Andrew, the sex abuser, who was the beneficiary of the pimping by Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, Andrew is being promoted by the lying Daily Mail as a moral person. Now, The Guardian has got 64-page souvenir magazine. It claims the 200 moments that made The Guardian for 200 years. And on the front page, there is a thing with the rugby star called Maro Itoje, who is quoted as saying, "I walked into my local supermarket. A member of staff asked me what time I was starting my shift. Ridiculous." Now that's the obviously African origin person who is the rugby star. And that's what the point they're making is the bourgeois approach to exposing racism. He says ridiculous. The racism that is inflicted daily on the target people of all backgrounds concerned does not leave the targets and the victims, and they violated, and they attacked with a bourgeois kind of word called ridiculous. Cannot do. And the fact that this rugby star is being featured in that piece shows the Guardian's own racist, stupid, ignorant location and position. And the Guardian is saying about Hartlepool, it's apparently written by its political editor. Winning formula. How did a Tory triumph in another former red wall seat? It was jabs, jobs, and hope. Now this is continuing the same line as the Daily Mail, the Sun, the Express. And there is a piece about Lib Dems and the Greens cheered by Gaines. But they're far from making any difference. And they've got a piece about this criminal called Usman Khan. And on page 16, this is a man who murdered an innocent. Was it 2 people he murdered? And apparently there was a forensic psychologist who gave evidence on his interview with Khan in 3 separate sessions in January 2018 in preparation for an extremist risk assessment report about Usman Khan. And is it Liba or Ivia? It says that she is a woman. So under questioning from Jonathan Hugh, QC, counsel to the inquest, this forensic psychologist said she had passed on these concerns to prison authorities. Summary of her extremist risk assessment of Usman Khan was read out by Hugh. It said, Mr. Khan has made little progress whilst in prison. He doesn't understand his own risk, and being imprisoned has made him a greater risk by elevating his profile. He still refuses to accept responsibility for his crime. During her interviews with Khan, he displayed underlying anger and bitterness in his approach towards me. She said she had been concerned the risk would increase once he was out of the controlled environment of Whitemore prison. The inquest was told that Khan was furious when shown a draft of the psychologist's report in March 2018. She said he was very angry and he was very upset about security information being used, saying that it was invalid, inappropriate, and speculative. The inquest continues. Now, this is the kind of detail that should have been applied, if you like, and investigated and examined before he was released. Number one. Number two, extrapolate that kind of approach, what we are saying should have been taken to relate to these 4 children, the 4 girls from Tar Hamlets that were brainwashed effectively. And they were brainwashed before they went to Syria. The first one that was directly approached and was in contact or contacted by the Sisters Forum based at the East London Mosque, according to Wikipedia, was of course the girl called Sharmina Begum, who left in December 2014 and then was joined 3 months later by Shamima Begum and the other 2 girls. During all of that time, they were children. And if the Tar Hamlets Council had carried out and was carrying out its legal duties to safeguard the children, then most of the key factors would have been identified. And in a reasonable context, appropriate action should have been and would have been taken, and the 4 girls would have been safeguarded. That wasn't done. So what I'm saying is that this Usman Khan inquest report is not a one-off. The events covered in terms of the duties owed to society by the various agencies, including in the context of these 4 girls in Tar Hamlets, by the local council. The duties are ever present, but they are not acted on. They are not carried out, which is where severe consequences take place against the innocent people and against society. Now that is traceable to the absence of democratic, ethical, moral audit that should be continuing of the behavior of the, in the case of these 4 girls, local Tar Hamlets Council, and where it applies of the behavior of the police, the behavior of the Crown Prosecution Service, the behavior of the DPP, behavior of the court system and the social services generally. So what we have in this country, in the UK, is absence. So this is the Guardian's kind of take on this rugby star. They're saying that he's rugby's brightest star. They're saying, and they're doing a promotion in the bourgeois way. They don't do that for ordinary black people. And they've got this bragging thing. Of course, we shall be examining the key boasts of the Guardian. Remember, the Guardian was in circulation during most of the British Empire in the subcontinent, and looking at representative contents of the Guardian's reports during those years and those decades, we have found that the Guardian was as racist and as stupid as the Daily Mail is. And the Guardian was not in any shape or form the platform or the voice against imperialism, against racism, against corruption. Now, the contrast to the bourgeois kind of coverage is found in this rare piece in the Racist Scum on page 14 about the death of the railway employee, a black woman, ticket office employee, Belly Mujinga, 47, who had claimed she was spat at and coughed on by a member of the public at London's Victoria Station. Her employers, Gobis Thames Link Railway, says she could have caught it anywhere. But after demands by her family, senior North London coroner Andrew Haque opted for a full hearing. He cited concerns about the lack of PPE given to station staff. An inquest date is to be set. Now, racists have spat on Asian and black people throughout the first year of the pandemic. And our campaign has witnessed racists doing that. So that is a typical racist incident encountered by people, black people, African people, every day. Now, again, the Scum is running a editorial, a full editorial, single editorial, just like the Daily Mail has run a single editorial. Normally, they run more than one editorial. And this one in the Scum is headed Fatal Flaw in Starmer's Party. But it's not telling the truth. Although it is using the word fatal, it's not telling the truth about Starmer, who is essentially a conservative, or a Tory, a right-winger. And everything in that description makes his leadership completely incompatible with what the country needs in order to get out of the grip by the party of crooks and liars and thieves and racists. That's what this Scum would never say. And then Caroline Flint, who was one of the right-wing racists behind Brexiteering sabotage, has said that is given a platform by the Scum. And they've got a piece about the inquest, about the ongoing trial of this policeman for the murder of the ex-sportsman, Dalian Atkinson. And the way he was attacked by this policeman is summed up in this heading, that he, the victim, Atkinson, hit the ground like a ton of bricks. That is how hard he was hit by the policeman. And they're overdoing this two-page spread for the Conservatives. And they're even running a bubble next to the picture of Starmer, saying, I wonder if Corbyn wants his job back. Now, this is something that was created by this Scum, because they made sure that Starmer was the leader of the Labour Party and that Corbyn was ousted. That is the actual reason why they wanted to be able to say what they're saying now, gloat. And the scum is saying that Sadiq Khan has lost to Sean Bailey. According to this piece, they're saying that Khan is trailing rival. Now, of course, the latest data, or the summary of the data from the website London Elects, shows that the difference between the votes got by Sean Bailey and Sadiq Khan is increasing, but not that fast, but it is increasing, or the difference is increasing. So the scum is wrong there, but let's see what the London Elects is saying. And this is showing slight increase in the gap between Sean Bailey and Sadiq Khan. You're saying Khan is showing Khan at 40% as opposed to 39%, with Bailey being 36%. Now, previously, in the earlier in the morning, this showed that Khan was at 39% and Bailey was at 37%. So since that time, Bailey has been stagnant at 36%, while Khan has moved about 3 percentage points to 40% now. And the Green Party, although it has been linked with Khan's losses or impacting on the amount of votes that Khan has lost, but still Shian Berry, the Green Party, is only at 8%. And the Lib Dems are half of that, which is 4%. And an independent called Nico Omilana is at 2%. And the racist Lawrence Fox is at 2%. And the London Real Party is at 1%. Rejoin the European Union is at 1%. And the Binface candidate, Count Binface for Mayor of London, is at 1%. And the Women's Equality Party on Orange is at 1%. And Jeremy Corbyn's brother, Piers Corbyn, Let London Live, is at 1%. And the Animal Welfare Party, People, Animals, Environment, Vanessa Helen Hudson, is at 1%. And UKIP is after that, Peter John Gammons at UKIP, 1%. And the independent Farah London has got 0%. So is David Cartan, Heritage Party, 0%. And all of the others, another independent called NIMS, Obunge, Steve Kelleher, Social Democratic Party, and the Cam Balaib Renew Party or Renew, Max Posh Independent North Point, and Valerie Brown, the Burning Pink Party. They're all at 0% at this stage, at this point, which is 11:17 hours GMT on Saturday, 8th of May 2021. Now we shall be keeping an eye on the movement in the percentages being shown as against each candidate for the mayor at the expense of London. Now there is no result and there is no access to the results on how the two so-called referendums went in Tower Hamlets and in Newham about the future kind of form of the council's so-called governance. Now it is possible, we don't speculate, it is possible that the votes have been significant, but we cannot say until the actual results are announced, which may be later today, later in the evening, we cannot say. But regardless of what the actual result in either Tower Hamlets or Newham, both these boroughs urgently need democracy to be established and restored, and accountability to be restored, and program initiated right away to end corruption in Tower Hamlets Council and corruption in Newham Council. And by corruption, we include, on the evidence and in context, a lot of racism and criminality by employed personnel, crooks that are in posts, senior management posts or managerial posts in both Tower Hamlets and Newham. And of course, we started the campaign yesterday, regardless of the results. So we are not waiting for some kind of somebody else or some agency or some group to come forward with an alternative to whatever the outcome is. We are the community and we need to march on with the campaign, and we shall be updating each and every stage of the campaign as we get to hear the result and then move on. Tower Hamlets is a council that is in the news as the area today because of the Grenfell Tower-like or style cladding involved in the fire that the Guardian is reporting. Let's see what the Guardian's report actually shows. It's not showing it very near the front page. It is behaving like the Daily Mail and giving a lot of details about a lot of rubbish. It's not telling the truth about why Johnson's frontage cabal allegedly got so many votes. Is it doing the story about the Isle of Dogs? Because it is online, but we have to do research to locate the story. And the item is on page 8. It should be on page 1, actually. But that shows the Guardian's bourgeois and corrupt editorial priority. the votes should not be celebrated in the way that they are doing. And this is the real election, because there is no regulation, and there is no safety for the people, and there is no evidence that the Guardian actually cares about the role played by the Conservatives in this. Now, it is quite possible that other fires would break out. So they're saying that £12 million would be estimated cost for making homes safe at the Poplar block before yesterday's blaze. Now, of course, this particular these leaseholders, these are the people mainly leaseholders, residents of a high-rise block with Grenfell-style cladding in East London that caught fire yesterday, causing a number of injuries, have voiced anger at the government and the buildings developer that nothing was done to make it safe sooner. Well, that should have been the main front page. If the Guardian was the guardian for society, then that should have been the front page, not the item about labor in turmoil, because that is predictable. That is predictable. That is not the news. And that's where the Guardian fails or chooses to fail and ignore the real story. So this is our world exclusive original diagnosis of Fleet Street, and we're condemning the Guardian as being as guilty as the Daily Mail and this scum of neglecting their duties to tell the truth to the public in Britain. Anyone who says the British press is a model of journalism must be told to look at the evidence and stop citing the British press, Fleet Street, as a model. It is not. This is the answer. Why the Conservatives got the votes that they do, and they have done, is because the Fleet Street and the rest of the media peddles the lies that go over the needs of the ordinary people that are affected by conservative lies and corruption and criminality. So we go back to the Financial Times and see what it is saying. And the Financial Times, we have named Financial Crimes, is vindicating us by having this headline. It says that Johnson writes on the vaccine bound. That's because the truth about the vaccine and the truth about the pandemic is being concealed and has been concealed by the Fleet Street and by Financial Crimes. And the fact that Johnson delayed introducing the lockdown in 2020 by openly boasting that he didn't care. He wanted thousands of people to die of the pandemic. Let the bodies pile high. That's what he said. And that's what the Financial Crimes and the others in Fleet Street, including the Guardian, the Daily Mirror, are suppressing the impact of and the consequences of, and what that symbolizes and typifies. And here is a rare piece in the Financial Crimes about the buy two, buy-to-let landlords doing the crimes. So we shall be looking at that later. Buy-to-let landlords. And we go back to India. And there are three pieces. There are three pieces in the Financial Times about India on page 8. And we shall look at all three of them. One is that they are belatedly and still dishonestly underplaying Modi's slide in popularity. They're saying that Modi's popularity slides as crisis deepens. Now, this is the story, this is the heading that should have been featuring in Fleet Street and in the Western media every single day of the past 6-7 years since Modi got in. Because Modi has been doing, in terms of the numbers of victims of his policies, Modi has been causing the deaths and denials of hundreds of thousands of people every week. That is what has been happening for the last 7 years, since the calendar 7 years, since Modi got in 2014. But the Western media have allowed him the impunity from coverage. And so therefore he has now been identified as causing actual deaths of hundreds of thousands of Hindus whom he relied on and whom he misled and whom he incited to attack Muslims and attack the Dalits, the untouchables, the poorest, over the last 7 calendar years. Now that's the introduction. And let's see what the actual content is saying. Prime Minister accused of not planning well enough for India's second wave. That's a lie. He did plan, and he planned what happened. That's like Johnson saying in March 2020, let the bodies pile high. Narendra Modi's popularity has fallen during India's deepening COVID crisis. Now, this is Amy Kazmin in Delhi and Benjamin Park in Bangalore. Although these two names, well, Amy Kazmin is a part European name, and Kazmin is, of course, Indian or Asian. And Benjamin Park, of course, European name. Although their names are mostly European, they're brainwashed stooges of the Modi regime and its propaganda operation. And they are not talking about Modi's attacks on democracy or anything else. And the fact that they are basing that piece on a so-called stinging letter to Modi yesterday from Rahul Gandhi, leader of the opposition Congress party, who they say sharply criticized the government for a lack of clear and coherent COVID and vaccination strategy, as well as hubris in declaring premature victory. That is only part of the evidence and the behavior of the liar Modi. That is not the main evidence. This is superficial. And the reason why this is superficial is because Rahul Gandhi, a member of the Nehru dynasty, is part of the corruption continuing in the Indian controlling parties, because the Congress party, owned by or controlled by or dominated by the Nehru family, has been colluding with the BJP. This has got two aspects. One is the historic collusion, in that the Nehru family prepared the ground for the BJP over most of the decades that the Nehru family was in control of the government in India. Both while Nehru himself was alive and was prime minister until his death in the 1960s. And then when he was followed by his daughter, Indira Priyadarshini Nehru, and she destroyed the myth of secularism or secular India. I mean, Nehru had done by continuing to occupy Kashmir and denying all the declarations that the United Nations had formally passed. Well, except the Security Council. Let's leave the Security Council on one side because it is an anti-democratic aspect of the United Nations. But the General Assembly of the United Nations passed serious reservations and condemnation of Nehru's occupation of Kashmir and Nehru's refusal to allow the people of Kashmir to have a plebiscite as to the future of Kashmir. And that was symptomatic of the BJP-like behavior by the Nehru-fronted Congress party. So anyone and everyone who says that the BJP is the first nationalist, Hindu nationalist, Brahminist nationalist party occupying the Indian government is actually factually wrong and ignorant and lazy, because nothing that Nehru did during the years August 1947 after his death was consistent with the international legal declarations for the people of Kashmir. And that had the inevitable impact of denying civil and equal rights to Muslims, not only in Kashmir but in the rest of the Republic of India. And that actually created a background for what is happening in the Seven Sisters. That is to say, the seven small Indian states in the northeast, particularly symbolized by the province of Assam, which is, well, province of Assam is because it's the biggest of these states. And there is this nationality criteria being registered of nationality and citizenship being operated there by the Indian government centrally and implemented by the provincial governments. And what this purpose is to attack Bangladesh. Now, Bangladesh is on paper a sovereign independent country in its own entitlements and constitution. But the behavior of the Modi-fronted kind of regime in central India, as implemented by the regional governments, especially that of Assam, shows that they don't recognize Bangladesh as even existing. Anyone watching this should remember that I said in the immediate aftermath of 1971, or the Indian Army or Indian Air Force intervened in the armed struggle that was going on. On the one hand, the armed attacks and oppression going on carried out by the Pakistan military, and the resistance against that by ordinary Bangladeshis who joined the quote liberation war. But they were not making decisive progress, these Bangladesh Liberation Army. So Indira Gandhi, who was in post as Prime Minister, decided to mount a comprehensive aerial attack on the Pakistan Army, accompanied by ground attacks. And that was a short run, lasting about few days, in the middle of December 1971. And that resulted in the Pakistan Army being forced to surrender to the Indian Army, as pictures show. And while that surrender was taking place, the man that has subsequently been decorated and praised as the leader of the Liberation Army of Bangladesh, General Ataul Ghani Osmani, was not present when the surrender by the Pakistan Army was formally implemented, and the party that took over the surrender instrument, if you like, and the party that owned the surrender of the Pakistan Army was the Indian Army. So immediately after that, right across the publishing aspects of India, literally hundreds of quote books, hundreds of books were commissioned, and all of them claimed at various kind of degrees of asserted facts, if you like, that India liberated Bangladesh from Pakistan Army. So that was in 1972, they published, because it was December when the Pakistan Army, 16th of December, when the Pakistan Army surrendered to the Indian Army. And so the books began appearing during 1972. Books by Indian writers. Many of them directly serving military personnel and Indian government personnel, officials. Consistently, they made the point that India liberated Bangladesh. And from 1972 onwards, they have been making the same claim. That claim was on the record and it was not challenged. It was not challenged internationally by any Bangladesh government that came into place, not in any significant, remarkable way. Until the BJP appointed this Amit Shah as the interior minister in the Modi government where he is now. And Amit Shah then elaborated on all those claims by India over the last decades about India liberating Bangladesh, that Amit Shah, said that Bangladeshis would be thrown into the Bay of Bengal. Now he said that, or words similar to that, even before the Burmese genocide of the Rohingya Muslims took place in 2017. And the National Citizenship Register, or whatever, Register of National Citizens, or whatever, National Register of Citizens in Assam was being prepared. And the Assam project is a project to abolish Bangladesh by making two kinds of, or two aspects of the claim. One is that most of the Muslims in Assam are Bangladeshis, not citizens of Assam or India. And two, that Bangladesh was sending large numbers of illegal Bangladeshis to enter and arrive in Assam and claim to be original Indians. Now that, if they take the action that Amit Shah has spelled out, that India would throw Bangladeshis into the Bay of Bengal, then that is what those two-pronged or two faces of the program represent. That's what is happening. And the Financial Times, Financial Crimes is completely avoiding mentioning any of that, as is Rahul Gandhi. The great grandson of Nehru. He's called Rahul Gandhi, as I said, because of his father's name was Gandhi. So Rahul is not his grandfather's name is Gandhi. So Rahul Gandhi is actually Rahul Nehru, because Sanjay and Rajiv were the children of a man called Gandhi, at least on all the records. But Rahul is a Nehru, and his quotation by the Financial Times, two writers, is a false and misleading quotation, because it doesn't actually give that even 10% of the facts that are actually relevant to describing what the Modi-fronted BJP regime has been doing. And anyone watching this also should know that many of the contents that we refer to are not accessible online because they are paywalled. So ordinary people looking for this item, searching the Financial Crimes website, will only get the introductory kind of few paragraphs. They won't get into the full article. Modi's popularity slides as crisis deepens. But even if they don't get that, what we do is we take a picture of this and post the picture on the Twitter account. And the Twitter account that we use for this purpose mainly is twitter.com//Khoodeelaar. Khoodeelaar is spelled as in the banner. So you can see the banner, and we shall look at the banner. That's where the So it's not in that particular banner, but the Khoodeelaar is spelled KHOODEELAAR. Well, Khoodeelaar TV is there. KhoodeelaarTV Channel is spelled the Khoodeelaar. The spelling of the Khoodeelaar is there. And so what you can do is during the hours after this broadcast, or every broadcast, we then add pages, not many, but some pages that we mention in the actual broadcast. So therefore this one, Modi popularity slides as crisis deepens, will be photographed and posted either during the program itself, this edition, or shortly after this edition is concluded. And what they're saying in there is an admission about the corruption of the data about the numbers of people, both infected and who are dying, in the same piece. The same piece by Amy Kazmin and Benjamin Parking from Bangalore, Amy Kazmin from Delhi. And this is the piece, and what the Rahul Nehru letter said is a call for a more decisive action to control the spread of the virus, as well as greater scientific tracking of the virus and its mutations. This should have been happening from the beginning of last year, 2020. And most of the times, Rahul Nehru and his clan and his Congress allies, including his mother Sonia, have been absolutely unheard of. That is to say, they have been silent. Mostly, not actually all the time, but mostly. So this piece is saying India reported a record 414,188 infections and 3,915 deaths on Thursday. Now this is Saturday, so 2 days ago. So the number must have gone up by now. There have been more than 234,083 confirmed deaths from the disease in the country. But that is an understatement, because it says the Financial Crimes admits. But most experts believed the figure severely undercounted. Severely. It's not a minor kind of difference of few thousand. It's hundreds of thousands of difference. So it's let's read the rest of it and then I'll add further comments. But most experts believed the figures severely undercounted the magnitude of the crisis because of a lack of testing, especially in small towns and rural areas. Now it says, and then there is a quote from somebody. Right now, data is very corrupted. And I'm quoting Gautam Menon as a professor of biology at Haque University, who told a recent seminar. It's good in some states and it's very bad in other states. But I have to say that the coverage in the English language Indian newspapers that we access from here, the coverage is completely even more corrupt because they don't even mention the central government in the main items. Almost kind of regularly is a blanket over-reporting of the words Supreme Court and the High Court. It's a complete diversion from the actual role and actual activities and the actual data. The Supreme Court is giving orders or receiving applications, that kind of thing. Because the Supreme Court is a supine court. The Supreme Court in India has been the supine court that is actually being abused as a court and is capitulating to the abuse by Modi and Shah et al. Many epidemiologists believe India's latest outbreak is set to peak in the coming weeks, so it's going to get worse in the coming weeks. And caseloads will gradually fall, then it will fall, they're saying. But the country's vaccination campaign is losing momentum because of an acute shortage of vaccine. The Modi government has been accused of failing to adequately plan its inoculation campaign. That's where it ends, which is complete joke. That is not the only problem with the Modi, because Modi has planned. It's not inadequacy. It's intentional policy, and we have covered the intention before in previous editions. Modi created this virulent surge by a multiple set of policies. The policies were to intentionally neglect the safety needs and the health needs of the majority of the ordinary people. That's what Modi did, and that's what is responsible. It's not inadequacy as if it was some kind of oversight or lack of care. It's not lack of care. It's too much attention has been paid to create that surge, an upsurge, an increase, and the catastrophe and the tsunami. All of these were known consequences and effects of what Modi was doing. Now here is a piece about a profile of a man they're calling Adar Poonawalla. Adar Poonawalla is being described as the boss of the organization called Serum Institute of India. Now let's see what they're saying. They're saying Vaccine Prince. They're calling him Vaccine Prince. And they're saying that the Vaccine Prince has been brought low by the tall order. And they're highlighting these two things there. They're saying history will have to judge the work of the company has done, whether we have profited here or whether we have served the nation. And he's being shown in the caption as sitting on the hot seat. Adar Poonawalla, and below his wife, Natasha, with actor Evangelo Bousis left, and fashion designer Peter Dundas. Now, Peter Dundas looks like a white person, and his wife looks almost like white, but it's impossible to say where she was born and brought up. And they're saying that Narendra Modi, India's Prime Minister, visited Serum's factory last year in a sign of his approval, and in January donated millions of its Oxford AstraZeneca doses as part of a diplomatic campaign to eclipse China and demonstrate his country's pharma power. Poonawalla established a sales office in London, where Boris Johnson, Prime Minister, announced Serum would invest 240 million to support trials, research, and possibly manufacturing in the UK. These are just business measures. But Serum's reputation has come under scrutiny in India. Scrutiny as India suffers life-threatening shortages of vaccines. COVAX, the United Nations-backed vaccine alliance, had expected to receive more than 100 million vaccines from Serum between February and May, but has received only 19.8 million, excluding India. Sajjan Jindal, chair of the JSW, the industrial conglomerate, said Poonawalla should have done more to work with the government and boost production. The tycoon said Poonawalla used a kind of ransom language to secure subsidies and investment in the UK rather than India. If I was in his place, I would go along with the government and support the government and do my bit in the time of crisis, he said. That is Sajjan Jindal. An advisor to Indian conglomerates who wished to remain anonymous said Poonawalla ran like a rat to London with his wife, but considered that the Indian government messed up big. Well, this is the kind of profile. It's like quoting one to blame another. And it doesn't actually identify the real problem, which is Modi. Because Modi didn't exert the necessary influence and pressure on Poonawalla or anybody else in a similar position or related position about supply of the medicine and the provision of the, in the wider context, provision of the beds and facilities. So it's Modi that should be actually blamed for the failures of Poonawalla and his likes. And on the COVID restrictions, there is a third item in the Financial Times, which is headed, this item is headed, Australia is accused of racism, illegality, and playing politics over India travel ban. Now, Australia is not being accused of racism. For the first time, Australia has been very racist, always. But the Australian racism has had an extra kind of pro-Indian bias in that the concentration of Australian racism has been based on its antagonism to Muslims. So whenever the Muslims from any countries have come under attack from Australian racists, the Indian government and Indian lobbies have treated that as a good thing. So the strategic capitulation to and collusion with racists in Australia that is now being felt by the victims of Australian racism who are being victimized, and they are mainly the Indians. When Australia threatened to jail citizens who breached a ban on returning from India during a severe coronavirus wave, it justified the measure by saying it wanted to keep public safe. But the travel ban, which carries criminal penalties of up to 5 years in prison, has sparked a backlash from civil rights advocates, the Indian diaspora, and the cricketing community with claims that this policy is racist, illegal, and cruel. All of this applied to the previous anti-Muslim Australian racism that all of these people have ignored. How stupid. Now they're being quoted as saying, it's a disgrace Blood on your hands, Prime Minister, says Michael Slater, a former Australian cricketer and commentator covering the Indian Premier League, wrote on the Twitter referring to Scott Morrison, the Australian Prime Minister. And the last paragraph in this piece by Jamie Smythe in Sydney. Ian McAllister, professor of politics at Australian National University, said, "The travel ban will be opposed by relatively small groups of people, but the loss of their support will be much less than the support they will attract for the measures from the broader public." So it's a popular Australian racist decision, which is what I said. Australia has always been very racist. And it's not just this time, but it has been always founded racistly and continued racistly. And looking at the latest statistical position about Sadiq Khan and Sean Bailey, the statistical proportion remains the same: 40% for Sadiq Khan and 36% for Sean Bailey. And most of the rest also remain the same. Sian Berry, Green Party, at 8%. Louisa Manon, Porritt, Liberal Democrats, at 4%. You see, they are talking about Modi's popularity slides as crisis deepens. It's absolutely untruthful and corrupt and complicit with Modi's anti-Muslim strategy. And there is a tweet from the Parisian. Yeah, the Parisian tweet says that the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen this morning announced a new contract to purchase up to 1.8 billion doses of anti-COVID vaccines from BioNTech Pfizer. So that is in the last few minutes. So the actual shortages of these vaccines are being referred to, not the effectiveness of the vaccines or the safety of the vaccines. Remember what we're saying. And the bragging and the boasting by the Daily Mail and the Scum and the Express of the electoral impact of Boris Johnson's vaccine program is being overhyped and over-peddled and over-promoted. And there is a complete silence as to the lack of evidence that this is going to last. Remember what we're saying? This is not something that can be allowed to remain on the record of the Fleet Street liars who are crediting so-called electoral success by Boris Johnson at Thursday's votings. And they're saying that this is all down to the vaccine or jab bounce. Because there is nothing in the Financial Times, let alone in any of the other papers, So what we are saying about this Adar Poonawalla, based on the piece profiling him in the Financial Times, is that India vaccine prince is exposed as a deadly opportunist. That's what we are calling him. And this is based on the facts that they're prepared to run in this piece of the Financial Times. And it is referring to Poonawalla's family wealth being based on the ambition of Cyrus Poonawalla. In 1966, the fedora-wearing, cigar-smoking, horse-racing aficionado transformed his stud farm into a global vaccine manufacturer. But it was not until the 1990s when Serum won World Health Organization approval to export vaccines to developing markets that the company gained an international reputation. When Poonawalla became chief executive in 2011, a year after the death of his mother, Vilu, he focused on expansion, diversifying the portfolio of vaccines and investing in research. Early in the pandemic last year, Serum was hailed for its role, but signs of strain soon appeared. A fire broke out at the company's factory in January, killing 5 people. 2 months later, New Delhi froze vaccine exports, which led to the international lawsuits and forced COVAX to delay immunization drives. Poonawala's pledge to boost Serum's production capacity of the COVID vaccine from 60 to 70 million a month to 100 million by March has been delayed until July. Poonawala said he would return to India in the coming days. So he's not in India yet. So they have spoken to him in London. While the company has begun distributing vaccines under a tiered procurement scheme, half of the doses would be reserved for the central government, while state governments and hospitals would be able to buy the rest at higher prices. So it's a crook, absolute crook. Analysts said New Delhi, that is Modi, had dodged questions about how the vaccine should be allocated, leaving it to Poonawala to explain his role as the final arbiter of the jabs for India's 1.4 billion population. There is a quotation there. We just try to equally distribute it across all the states. That's all, he said. The government is guiding us. He insisted, however, that he could deliver. It's not rocket science, it's just getting the job done. He's echoing Boris Johnson on Brexit, getting the job done. If it is not rocket science, and if it is just getting the job done, then why are so many hundreds of thousands of people in India suffering and dying? That question is not answered by any of the three pieces by the Financial Times, which makes the Financial Times the financial crimes. And the Financial Crimes has got a propaganda piece for a fascist woman in Spain. So you read the papers. This is £4 on a Saturday, the Financial Crimes. And you look for the truth, and you look for one item, two items, as many as 3 items about India alone, and you don't find the truth. If the Modi regime is accused of dodging the questions, then so is the Financial Crimes, allowing the serious questions to be left unprinted, unpublished, unaccessed by the Financial Times. And its fast editorial today is that the Republican Party is drifting further into Trumpism. And they're saying in the second item about Britain that Boris Johnson has reinvented the Tories in his own image. And it says the The subheading is "The defeat in Hartlepool leaves the Labour Party searching for a way forward." And it says in the last paragraph, "In truth, areas such as Hartlepool have been trending away from Labour for decades, as the traditional industrial working class has aged and shrunk. Labour sister parties in continental Europe are suffering from similar demographic shifts. Hopes for the centre left in Germany lie with the Greens more than the Social Democrats. Some of them too are struggling against opponents that have combined right-wing populism with promises of more spending. It is this formula that Johnson's Conservatives have now partially co-opted, so far with success. Now, the analysis about Germany in there applies to Britain, of course, as it is stated here as being. And what they are not saying about demography and the changing demography and the changing industrial landscape is that the Labour Party has been politically morose. It is dead now because Starmer has politically murdered it, but it has been dying even before Starmer appeared on the political kind of plane. It couldn't be. The Labour Party had to be murdered unless it was given the life-saving program, active program, and it hasn't been given. We go back to Neil Kinnock, who was the most loudest noisemaker in the name of the Labour Party leadership. But he was empty. Neil Kinnock was an empty, corrupt individual who made a lot of noise, but who didn't end the corruption in the Labour Party. And it was racist, corrupt, undemocratic, authoritarian leadership. The main focus, which was displayed with rigor and pride by Kinnock, the main program for the Labour Party leadership was to attack the Labour Party campaigners. So instead of turning Margaret Thatcher's failures into substantial, credible, claiming grounds for the Labour Party to get back into elected positions, Kinnock colluded with the Thatcher program of demonstrating that the Labour Party was irrelevant, which Kinnock was complicit in making the Labour Party become irrelevant. And when Peter Mandelson, Alistair Campbell, and Tony Blair contrived the victory in May 1997, they did that. They did that on the foundation that the Labour Party's murder was going to happen sooner or later. They were carrying the Labour banner, but they were actually causing serious illness to the body politics of the Labour Party, which Blair did in the main, forgetting one or two legislative steps during the 3 elections. Tony Blair actually pursued serial anti-Labour and anti-society steps, quite apart from the wars which are not in need of explanation. Those were clear evidence of right-wing, reactionary, warmongering, imperialistic adventures that were nothing to do with the Labour Party or the Labour aims. So today's boasting by the scum, the Daily Mail, the Express and the other rest of the media, that Starmer has been blown and the Labour Party and Johnson has blown the Labour Party on Thursday. This is not right. This is not true. The Labour Party has been being subjected to deadly destruction by successive leaders. How does Corbyn feature in this? Corbyn didn't murder the Labour Party in the way that the others did or others were doing. Corbyn caused a deadly kind of deficit in the Labour Party's image to the ordinary people by Corbyn being intellectually deficient and tactically deficient, despite the fact that these people like his overhyped media person or communication strategist, Seamus Mill, these people have come out or turned out to be lacking in intellectual substance and tactical, strategic steps. And these people, by these people I include the likes of Tariq Ali, who are overhyped as socialist heavyweights, which they are not. These people have failed, singularly failed, collectively failed to make Corbyn over the 5 years use the platform of the leadership of the Labour Party to mount the devastating attack that the Conservatives deserved and they never got from the Labour Party leader. He became their target because of his intellectual deficit and because of the intellectual deficit of his advisors, including Tariq Ali. As I have said before, when Corbyn was being given the microphone, because that is what happened, he was given the microphone almost every day that he left his house in Islington. And there were any number of broadcast journalists. Let's put it this way, broadcast, television, visual journalists. Instead of making that platform come to life as a platform to have a go at everything that was wrong with the Conservatives, Corbyn ran away. Corbyn ran away. Corbyn ran away. So contrary to the myth that Corbyn was destroyed by his critics who did contribute to his destruction, it was Corbyn who didn't have the abilities, the intellectual abilities, and his advisors, including Tariq Ali and Seamus Mill and others, who, as I said, singularly and collectively and regularly failed to turn these events that were available for Corbyn to fully politically make use of, legitimately, morally and ethically and evidentially as well. They failed to do any of that. And Starmer was never, when he became an MP and when he became a frontbench spokesperson, whatever the subject, Brexit or not, anyone looking at his body language, anyone looking at his language, anyone looking at his substance, that is the content of what he was presenting, must have been able to see, anyone reasonably intelligent, observant, and aware and conscious, must have been reasonably convinced that Starmer was not a winner. Starmer was dead himself, politically dead, that is, of course, because he was giving kind of bureaucratic lines and chapters and reminders, and he came across as a walking statue. He was stagnant. And he looked and sounded like he was 500 years behind. And if not behind, 500 years away from the topics, the issues that matter to ordinary life and ordinary people. So, when I say that Starmer politically murdered the Labour Party, I don't mean just the Labour Party's prospects and the image, but the Starmer politically, remember what I'm saying, politically was never alive. Never alive. He never scored politically against the Conservatives. And the contrast is that particular few seconds of appearance by Ed Miliband, who cornered Boris Johnson conclusively and decisively in that particular appearance. That is the contrast. That is what Starmer could have and should have done. Well, he couldn't have done because he didn't have the material that Ed Miliband used. But there should have been somebody with that knowledge.